Welcome back to the Dale Wiley Show. I'm happy today to have Tim Clifford, a New York City visual artist, as my guest. Tim's show Threat Assessment opened last month in Howl Happening in New York City and continues through this month. In addition, Tim has a history with older country music, one of my loves, and was one of the founders of Maybelle, which was a very popular zine in the early 90s, very beautiful, containing artist renderings of Dolly Parton and nudie suits and really wonderful articles on true country music. And I'm happy to talk to Tim about both of those today.
So I'm here this afternoon with Tim Clifford, who has a new art exhibit in New York City. And Tim, I'm glad to have you here.
Thanks, Dale.
And tell me a little bit about what's going on with Threat Assessment and Howl Happening.
This is my first one-person show in New York after many years of work, but actually goes back like 6 or 7 years, the earliest works in the show, and it's all works that are on the themes of like fear and violence and gun violence specifically, but I think for me it's a little bit broader than that too, just in terms of our relationship to these ideas. So that's the broad view.
One thing that I was interested in, I mean, obviously you've been posting images kind of not only dealing with the show that you're currently having in New York, which, how long does that run?
It's up, this week will be the last week, so it's up through Sunday the 10th, and the gallery's open Wednesday through Sunday.
Okay. But obviously you've been working on your concepts for this show for some time.
Yeah,
You date it back even further, but you first started really dealing with this concept in 2013. Is that right?
Well, I mean, there's, it's interesting sort of as you make work, you see connections with things you did some time ago. But so there's one work in the show called Target Panic, which is 100 gouache drawings on paper, all based on actual shooting targets, mostly from competition shooting and like sort of sniper training. But I started on those in 2008, and actually that took me through 2012 to finish those. I was working on a book that during that time, so that was like a good thing. Whenever I would have a break in the writing, I could spend a couple days on one of those drawings. And then in 2013, I had finished that, and I was beginning work on this new body of work based on carnival shooting galleries. And I had discovered the images and was trying to figure out how I was going to work with them. I knew I was going to make something, and that coincided with the shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary School, which I was actually in my studio working on the kind of the early part of this series, which I refer to the whole series as the Threat Assessment series, and that's the title of the show, Threat Assessment. But I was in the studio listening to NPR, and the reports of the shooting at Sandy Hook came on the radio, and I was just kind of picturing, it was my childhood elementary school, so I could picture every step of the landscape around there. So, and that kind of clarified some ideas about this new body of work for me. I mean, there's kind of like the formal questions, but then there's the sort of the larger idea behind the work and stuff. So,
and you'd actually done, was it an exhibition in Sandy Hook before that, or you'd actually done
I mean, my parents lived there until a few years ago, so I had done this big earthwork in their backyard like 10 years ago, which was sort of the idea of bringing like a large-scale earthwork, like the spiral jetty or something, back into like a suburban setting, and I actually buried a model of the neighborhood I grew up in their backyard. That piece could be, I don't know, it's interesting. There's one part of that piece which is sort of environmental, like what was this land like before we lived here? And then there's a part of it that connects kind of to the shooting, which was, just kind of putting aside all the kind of anger and, whatever feelings you have in high school or something, just about getting away from where you grew up. So, it's like a literal burying of the past, but also of these, negative emotions or something too. So,
and I guess the one question that I'd have is having, an actual real connection to Sandy Hook, which obviously is a completely different thing than seeing it on Fox News or CNN or something along those lines.
Right.
And then dealing with this idea of guns and fear and everything else. I'd be interested to know how you feel that all the conspiracy theories and truthers and other things like that kind of play into all of this.
In terms of like the Sandy Hook truthers and that whole aspect of it. Yeah. I think the funny thing with that is that it's like once you get into that, it's like the people who are, and this is one of just our general problems, is like the people who are focused on that aspect of it are really like, talking to themselves, and, we all sort of are nowadays online and stuff. You can kind of fall into your little group think, and, I don't even know what to think of. It's amazing how quickly these things started, when all you have to, they're, some of the more absurd claims that they make and stuff is kind of like, it's not that, I was in Sandy Hook, a week after the shooting happened. It's not hard to know that it actually happened. And, I know people who were friends of the mother of Adam Lanza, and, were mourning her death, as much as, the larger thing, So, the whole thing was victims, and just people are just, I don't know, conspiracy theories are kind of a rabbit hole that once you go down that you're, I don't know. I guess I understand the appeal. Like you can, it just confirms everything you want to believe.
It exonerates you from any responsibility.
Yeah. And, the interesting thing for me is like kind of like the target panic works, these very abstract, they look just like abstract paintings, and most people, I try to avoid things that were sort of explicitly, say, target-like, not your just classic bullseye, but more complex geometric things. And when I was doing those, I have a lot, all of these things have layers of meaning and layers of interest. But for me, it was this interesting thing that they kind of existed on this edge between kind of these utopian abstract designs like Malevich and the Russian constructivists, but then they also had this function in the world, and that these were two worlds that never are thought of as meeting, this kind of, high modernism and, abstract art, and then, this kind of American gun culture, which, when you see, I had like 1,500 targets, someone's spending the time creating these things. They had like 1,500 targets to like select from, to choose the 100 that I ended up including in the series. So, I don't know. It's an interesting fact that the threat assessment series with the carnival things, the titles of those pieces are more explicitly, pointing to some of the contradictions, I guess, in our relationship to violence, whether it be entertainment or, actual shooting and in our culture today.
But I've noticed that, there's a very big sense of, there's a sense of scale in this, of what you've done, from the kind of repeated imagery in some of the smaller works, to a couple of images that are very kind of grand and beautiful. And what was your goal in kind of how you thought of putting the show together?
Well, Howl Happening is an interesting space. It's a nonprofit space for one, which was we can talk about this at some point. It was founded as part of the legacy of Arturo Vega. It's called Howl Happening and Arturo Vega Project, and Arturo was the guy who designed the Ramones logo and called like the fifth Ramone. He was their lighting director and saw all but like two of their concerts, 2,500 concerts or something, and he lived right around the corner from where the gallery is now, and died unexpectedly. So this is part of his legacy, was to help establish this foundation to create this kind of really like interdisciplinary space. And it's largely focused on kind of East Village artists, but they were interested in the sort of political content of my work. So not having the pressure of like a commercial gallery, I could make something that was ridiculously big. The largest piece in the show, 12 feet tall and 24 feet long. So everything was kind of very carefully considered for the space itself. But like Target Panic, the title of that series refers to this condition that affects competition shooters and archers, where after like hundreds of hours of practicing, they go to aim and their hands start shaking uncontrollably. So it was the idea of being sort of overwhelmed by too many targets. So part of that scale of that piece and having so many small pieces is sort of like a visual overload, which I also kind of equate with the idea of having just, everything now we're supposed to be afraid of, and everything is supposed to be a target. So, go out and not just get your guns, but, stock up with your duct tape and plastic in case there's a chemical attack, all the kind of things that we lived through, like post 9/11. And then the scale of the threat assessment pieces, they're all done on a one-to-one scale with the designs of these 1920s shooting galleries. So everything is sort of interchangeable, one drawing to the next. One element of a target will be the same because they're all done at life scale. So which is part of that is, I want you to have that kind of physical experience of being like enveloped by the work.
Do you? I love the large piece especially. I think it's really striking, and I guess, but I think it's also it's not a piece that is abstract in the sense that it's putting items that wouldn't necessarily look like. It could be right out of some sort of shooting gallery. I mean, it could be very much a real piece. And I guess maybe if you could take a second and explain it. I mean, I'll put some pictures up on the website,
sure.
but tell me.
Well, I mean, they're actually based on they're like catalog. It took me a long time to track them down, but I kind of, from like book dealers and stuff, was able to track down some catalogs from manufacturers of like carnival equipment in the 1920s and 30s, and that's what these images are based on. And there's a certain amount of information that's left out, but so I am working from a source. I'm not inventing the imagery, and that's something that typically in my work I generally don't invent the image. I'm taking something that exists in the world and kind of doing a lot of research into all these different aspects of kind of it used to be sort of an idea of landscape, like the contemporary landscape, but now has moved into more just kind of the American vernacular, objects that we're around and are familiar with, but trying to mine them for different levels of meaning. So there's a lot of kind of research that goes on in my work.
How far ahead are you thinking about the ideas that you're going to be taking on?
I don't know. There's a piece in the show, which is the last piece I actually made for the exhibition called A Good Death, and it's an image of a willow tree that it's a charcoal drawing, and it's been drawn and erased until it's this very sort of soft image that looks almost like a rubbing from a tombstone. And it's actually, the image is something that I photographed 4 or 5 years ago. So sometimes there's things that I'll immediately, like, I'll have the idea and I'll immediately start work on it. And then there's things that I'm reading about, or that there's a print that I made in the show, which includes this image from a parade in Newtown, Connecticut, and from the Labor Day parade. And it's something that I clipped out of the Newtown Bee, which is the hometown paper. And I've been carrying that around with me for like 25 years, planning to do something with it, because the image just was sort of striking to me, and I just never knew exactly what I was going to do. I have a lot of sculpture ideas based on the image, and so this was a chance. I wanted to do something. There were so many large works in the show. I wanted to do something that was smaller and affordable. So we did, a print, like an addition to print for the show. But, so I don't know. The ideas are kind of, sometimes you know exactly what you're doing. Sometimes you have no idea what you're doing. It makes sense later.
Right.
But, a lot of these things, sometimes there's a long gestation period. Sometimes, like when I first saw the first image I was actually researching con men and the whole sort of culture of the Midway, and I wasn't planning on doing these shooting galleries. I was looking at all these other types of carnival game boards and stuff, and I saw this image. I was able to buy one of these old catalogs, and I saw the image of these shooting galleries, and I knew immediately, like, the next week I started work on it, so. But then the series is still developing. I mean, I had to develop this whole technique of soaking paper in black ink and drawing it on these huge screens that I built in my studio to get the kind of the perfect unmarred black surface. And the white, I cut out all the white figures in the drawings before I soaked the paper in the black ink, so that the white is this kind of pure, untouched white paper, kind of eliminate any trace of the hand of my hand, and just have this like real kind of this purity that kind of stands in contrast to this image that would then be, shot to hell for,
right.
I mean, you see some of that's amazing. I mean, I've gotten to look at some old shooting galleries, and you'll have this, quarter-inch steel that's literally bending, several inches, like curling backwards because it's been shot so many times,
Right.
So just the weakening of that. But I mean, the surface of those things is really incredible, just the abuse that they can take.
And so what will happen after this showing? What are the next steps?
I don't know. I mean, I'm sending out, I was lucky, the gallery produced a catalog for the show, so I've been sending out a lot of catalogs and some of the press on the show to various people. I'd like to show the work in Connecticut and like really get into a kind of the dialogue of the local dialogue, but we'll see. I mean, I'm not just looking at Connecticut, so we'll see if anyone else is interested in showing it. But then I have, it's all coming back to my studio at this point because nobody apparently has a 12 by 24 foot wall waiting for a drawing. But
right.
There's still another week. But then I'm starting work on a public sculpture. It'll be on Randall's Island in New York.
Okay.
And that's, I don't know, I have to start work on that as soon as the work comes back for the show, and that goes up in May. So, just kind of switching gears back to working in 3 dimensions and a really complicated piece that I'm not quite sure how to make, but I'll figure it out. That's the challenge.
Well, now tell us where Howl Happening is.
Yeah, it's on First Street between the Bowery and 2nd Avenue. So it's right very close to the 2nd Avenue or Broadway Lafayette subway stops downtown. And they're open. We're doing they're open 11 to 6 Wednesday through Sunday. And one of the interesting things is they do a lot of events to kind of the gallery only opened less than a year ago, so they do a lot of cross programming. So we had Yashiko Chuma and her dance company, School of Hard Knocks, did an amazing performance. And short story writer Jeannie Heath read her work, and this Thursday we're having from Paris Judy Nylon, who was in the band Snatch in the late 70s and worked with John Cale and Brian Eno and was sort of this the international downtown legend. I mean, she was in London in the early 70s and New York, and now lives in Paris, but she's going to be doing a performance piece specifically kind of on some of the themes of the show. So,
wow, that's great. I mean, do you feel, are you happy with how it's gone off? I mean, what are your...
Yeah, no, everything's been great. I mean, it's been a tricky time just because it's been the holidays, so it's a tricky month to have an exhibition, but these performances and stuff are a great way to kind of, bring in different audiences and get people who might not see the show in. So I think it's a great aspect of the gallery.
And what's your website and what's the gallery's website?
Okay, my website is T. Clifford, like Tim Clifford, just tclifford.com. And then the gallery website is howlarts.org, HOWLARTS.org. And they, like for the event on Thursday, they have a live stream going all the time when the gallery's open. So there'll be a live stream of the performance on Thursday. It's just when you go to the website, it's the home page is the live stream.
Cool.
And then when they're not in gallery hours, it's just, a static image or something. But
okay, when we come back, we're going to switch gears drastically and talk about country music. Back with Tim Clifford, our artist who's got a gallery show going on right now in New York called Threat Assessment at Howl Happening. Tim, we first met many years ago in a very, very odd way, and it was because of a mutual love for old country music. And I've never heard your story about how you gained such an esoteric knowledge of, 40s, 50s, 60s country music. So share that with us.
Well, I'm from Connecticut, so it doesn't read that I would know much about country music. But I don't know. I grew up. My father, I guess both of my parents kind of grew up during the folk revival era in the early 60s when they were in college, and there were a lot of like bluegrass festivals, pickin' and fiddlin' contests and things like that in Connecticut and New York and just New England in general during the early 70s. So I had some exposure to that, and by the time although like the first concert I went to was an Iron Maiden concert, I somehow, when time came, I asked if I could take banjo lessons, and I don't know. I think by the time I was like 15 or something, it was. I honestly can't remember if I got my first Woody Guthrie album before I got a Bob Dylan album, or if it was the other way around. But it really was just a research project. Sort of got some Woody Guthrie records, and then some Carter Family records, and then a Hank Williams album, and along with a lot of other stuff. But then, I had some good friends in college, like our mutual friend Aretha Sills, who, shared a lot of music with me over the years. And when I moved to San Francisco, it was the end of the vinyl era. So everyone had dumped their vinyl collections to switch to CDs, and you could go to record stores all around the Bay Area, and you could get albums for anywhere from 10 cents to $1, and there was just they had such a glut of records that I built most of my record collection or my vinyl collection in those years, just going every weekend to go through the bins and find stuff, and just finding amazing stuff. So, it really was just kind of like a connected dots. You find Hank Williams, and then you have to go and find some Roy Acuff, and it's all pre-internet, pre-computer. So really what you're exposed to is just what you had and what your friends had. That's sort of how it happened.
Well, and what we found was, what I found was I happened to be in San Francisco one day, and I came across the first issue of your zine, which was called Maybelle.
Yeah.
Named for Maybelle Carter, Mother Maybelle, which was just, I didn't know how bad I wanted Maybelle until I read it, but it was beautiful illustrations and really funny, really great writing about country music. And so you and Aretha actually originally met in Bard, or at Bard College, right?
Yeah, at Bard College, and then we reconnected in San Francisco, and I'm not even sure what I wish I could remember the discussion that actually led to the formation of it. It was Aretha, myself, and our friend Bill Stavru, who was in New York. He was our New York editor. I don't know. I wish I could remember the actual conversation that led to the formation of Maybelle, but it was it was definitely a labor of love, and the first time I actually ever used a computer was to type up the Maybelle articles, but then we would cut them out, and it was all cut and paste, the whole thing, and all the drawings were done by hand, and we're lucky we were able to figure out how to do it with some help from Kinko's and some other local copy shops getting the copies done. But it seems it's strange given the kind of the legend of Maybelle right now, but among like people I know who've heard of it, who've never seen it, or just they know that it happened. It has a much larger presence in my life than it would seem for a fanzine that had only 4 or 5 issues in the early 1990s. But I still have you included a lot of people that I met through it, and musicians, and I actually met my wife through Maybelle because she was managing bands in San Francisco that Maybelle covered, and it's a very funny thing.
That is funny, and of course, to give you a flavor of it, if you haven't ever seen it, you should definitely Google Maybelle. But it had articles like a guide to buying George Jones tapes at what was it, at gas stations, or was it?
Yeah, or at truck stops. Yeah, buying George Jones tapes at truck stops, which Aretha had done and had a big collection of. That was really like, for a lot of that old country music, that was the place you had to go to find that stuff. It wasn't.
It wasn't on CD. Yeah.
No, it wasn't on CD, and record stores didn't stock a lot of that stuff at that point. And then there was, it was right at the point there was the big sort of, this kind of what became kind of Americana, and it was before No Depression, although I think No Depression existed as a message board on AOL. I'm not sure about the origins of it, but it was we were totally outside of that. We were too poor to have a computer of our own. And, it definitely was pre-internet, and then I think just as that was getting going, No Depression started up online, and then eventually became a magazine. But they were always too serious for us. We had a definite. We were very Puritan, and at the same time very irreverent. We had very strict standards of what could go in the magazine. So we had a review of all the Willie Nelson movies, all the movies based on his songs, and all the movies that he had appeared in. We had interviews with Freakwater and Townes Van Zandt, but we weren't even then. We were sort of wary of kind of a lot of the up and coming acts, whether it's sort of alt country or even regular country music, Nashville country, big time. But
well, it had some interesting. It had Aretha's sister Polly is a fantastic artist, and it had Dolly Parton cutout dolls, and it had some of your work. They were really wonderful magazines.
Yeah,
and I ended up contributing a good bit to issues 3 and 4, but of course I loved them all. So of course Aretha's people are Dolly and Merle. Those are her kind of stalwarts. Who are yours?
Well, I would say in those days, Aretha was like the Dolly partisan, and I was the Merle partisan. But that was a mutual love there. But for myself, Merle is still my number one country artist, followed probably by George Jones and Dolly, Loretta Lynn, Buck Owens, but then a lot of the really early, the Carter family, Jimmy Rogers, my real love of country music was that kind of really early, those early recordings from the 20s and the 30s, the Blue Sky Boys, and shading over into the blues, the Mississippi Sheiks, Mississippi John Hurt, and Skip James. And it's interesting. This is going back to the first part of our conversation. I mean, the recent body of work that I've been doing and the kind of interest in kind of American vernacular images is definitely very much tied to this kind of interest in country music. And I think there was sort of something switched in my mind maybe, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago, where I realized, I think it comes through in the earlier work, but I definitely made there was some awareness that I wanted to get that kind of, that interest in, American culture, American history into my visual artwork. And, I've done a lot. I've done a lot of research just doing the series on shooting and shooting galleries, shooting targets, all this stuff. I've done a lot of research into the old murder ballads and the history of, late 19th century American history, when a lot of the ballads like Poor Ellen Smith and Stagger Lee were being written in the 1890s, and the kind of history of violence and stuff in America and how it's celebrated and stuff. So it's all part of the same thing, although nobody would necessarily look at the work and say, this is about country music. But
right.
But I kind of, I think at its best, country music is talking about people's lives, everyday concerns, the most simple but the most fundamental and profound concerns of people's lives. And it can certainly, in more and more, shades into ridiculousness with the kind of, we could get into a whole discussion about recent country music the last couple of years, the kind of bro country kind of thing. And, there hasn't been a lot of excitement. There's been, the last 15 years, a big shift away from drinking and cheating songs and shift to more songs about celebrating how loyal I am to my family and how I don't go out drinking and how I go to church and take care of my family. And it doesn't make for very interesting songs.
Right. Oh, yeah,
things are always more interesting when you're talking about the sort of the trials of life instead of, the simple pleasures in life often don't make for exciting drama. So,
right. Yeah, there's a whole lot more market share right now in taking the Jeep and going mudding in the in the creek, and having a girl that's got painted on jeans with you.
Exactly. Yeah. I don't know. It would be a good issue of Maybelle if we ever do get it going online again, to sort of trace the genealogy of the marital fidelity song, or something. So,
well, yeah. When you look at the kind of stuff that we really like, the mid '60s, just strange as hell stuff that that George and Maybelle were doing, or
God.
The way Bobby Bear was interpreting Tom T. Hall's, just I'm not even caring about what a jerk I am, kind of Margie's at the Lincoln Park Inn kind of stuff. I mean, that just seems like a totally different genre than anything that's appearing on the radio now.
Yeah, no, definitely. The songs that have come out of the last 10 years of war have all been, except for the occasional Dixie Chick song, have all been about, celebrating American power in the most banal kind of way, whereas I think, if you trace the history of, Vietnam and country music, year by year, it traced, the changing attitudes and understanding and experience what war was. And, if you go from Johnny Wright, Vietnam, to
Kenny Rogers. And
there's just, from very pro-war to very, to really kind of like Chris Christopherson and understanding the drug problems and everything that people went through is, it was much closer to the bone back then, but there wasn't as much market research going on back then. So,
and there wasn't as much money to be made either.
Exactly. These were
the biggest country stars didn't make anywhere near. Maybe Johnny Cash did once he got his show, but country singers didn't make the kind of money they do now.
Yeah, and that show didn't really last very long, although, 2 or 3 years and it was gone. It wasn't wasn't a huge success, although it was the mark of huge success on his part. So, but, I'll still maintain that Loretta Lynn's Coal Miner's Daughter is one of the great works of feminist literature in the late 60s, early 70s. I don't remember what year it was published, but it should be up there with Betty Friedan and Gloria Steinem and stuff. So, it's definitely that. That's where the interest comes in, and that's, I think that's my relationship to it. It's not all political. It's a musical thing too, but it's the interest in it is
the protest songs of Buck Owens. We need to find a way to.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
No, that side of country isn't political, but it sure is fun just to look at how brilliant some of that stuff was, and even to this day, there are a lot of people that don't give it the credit that it deserves, which to me is just shocking.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree. But, I don't know. Well, there's lots of talk of reviving Maybelle in one form or another, and we still need to get the issues up online as e-books and stuff. So maybe this next year that'll finally happen.
Maybe that could be a 2016 thing.
If everyone signs off on it, we'll see. We still have, and we go back and forth between being Luddites or true to the roots of cut and paste.
Right.
So,
right. Yeah, definitely the online debate has been as big as anything. That seems to be a real kind of dividing line in the redo of Maybelle. I think the idea of putting it out in some sort of print form would give certain people more interest in it than putting it online.
There you go. I don't know. It's life is complicated, and we don't have enough time to sit around and just play each other's songs anymore. But I think it'll happen. I don't know.
Take me through if you had to lead someone into some country songs that they just absolutely need to know about. Tell me what songs you'd pick. Give me five songs.
Okay. Well, going back, I would say, going back a long ways, start with Jimmy Rogers, Dreaming with Tears in My Eyes, which is just one of the most heartbreaking performances ever, and still holds up 90 years later or so. Then I could do like a list of 30 songs would be a lot easier, but go with Rank Stranger by the Stanley Brothers, which is sort of renders the whole idea of you can just skip existentialism. You can skip Camus and Sartre and just go with the Rank Stranger, which is just, just the most devastating song. And, I was trying to think of, you could go with Hank Williams' I'm So Lonesome I Could Cry is probably the perfect country song, but I find myself torn between A House of Gold and Alone and Forsaken from his demo recordings that I go back to over and over again. Now, Merle Haggard, I probably have 100+ Merle Haggard records, and it's hard to pick just one song. I think the first song that really hooked me in was probably I Forget You Every Day from his I Love Dixie Blues album. But then from a later record, maybe Kern River would go on that list of my top 5 songs.
Kern River is a song about. Tell everybody what Kern River is about.
Kern River is, what it's about. It's about, I guess it's about facing your mortality and the mistakes that you make, but it's a song about, the lyrics of the song recount someone who recounts the story of a woman, like a loved one, who was swept away by the current of the river, and basically someone who grew up on that river and had to move away to far north, 10 hours north in California by car, to get away from the painful memories of that. But it was just a devastating song. And I don't even know what number we're at now, but we could add My Blue Tears by Dolly Parton, or an instrumental, Jerusalem Ridge by Bill Monroe is one of the songs that really moved me getting into country music, just a devastating fiddle tune. I don't know. There's so many great songs. Each one is kind of powerful in its own way, but I think that covers a few suggestions for someone starting out.
Very nice, absolutely. All right, well, thanks, Tim. I'm going to get this up so that people that want to think about going to Howl Happening this weekend can come and maybe ask you for some country music recommendations while they're there.
That's great. Thank you so much, Jeff.
So there you go. Go see Threat Assessment at Howl Happening, which ends January 10th, which is Sunday. And look forward to future episodes of the Dale Wiley Show, including Denise Grover Swank and Eric Amble, and plenty of other surprises. Visit us at dalewiley.com. There's also a Tumblr, dalewiley.tumblr.com. Throw money at us, buy some books, and come back and recommend it to your friends. Copyright 2016.